Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ready for another deep dive? Today we are tackling some pretty big topics. We're going to be talking about gold, wealth, and maybe even where society's headed. And we've got a source that brings in David Lynch.
It's a fascinating combination. When you start to look closely, there are a lot of intriguing connections between these topics, especially when you consider the anxieties and aspirations we are seeing right now.
Okay, so let's break this down, starting with something that feels like it's on everyone's mind right now.
Mm.
Gold. It feels like we're in Gold Rush 2.0. Why is the price surging so much?
It is interesting you use the term gold rush because there are some parallels to those historical periods. One of the main drivers right now is central banks. They're diversifying their reserves away from the US dollar. How are they doing that? By stockpiling physical gold.
So is this a sign that the U.S. dollar is losing its power as the world's reserve currency?
Well, it's definitely a sign that things are changing globally. And it's not just China and Russia. Other countries like Poland and India are also increasing their gold holdings.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I even read that the London bullion market, which is basically the central hub for gold trading, is having a hard time keeping up with the demand for physical gold. Sounds kind of
It
intense.
does. The London bullion market is like the heart of the global gold trade. It's where all the major institutions and central banks buy and sell gold, and they're seeing delays in delivering physical gold. So what does that mean? It could mean that people are looking for tangible assets instead of just contracts on paper.
Yeah, it definitely makes you think. So what does all this mean for the average person who might be thinking about investing in gold? Is it just a gamble, or is there something more to it?
Well, that is the question, isn't it? There will always be some speculation around gold, but you need to look beyond the price going up and down all the time. Historically, gold has kept its value for a very long time. It's a hedge against inflation and economic turmoil.
Oh, so you're saying it's more about holding on to wealth for future generations, not about making a quick profit.
Exactly. It's like an insurance policy against things going wrong financially. And it's not just about gold bars or coins either. There are gold mining companies. They're doing incredibly well right now with the price of gold going up, so their stocks might be a good investment.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of that. So it sounds like the gold story is much bigger than just its price. It's more like a reflection of what's happening in the world economy and politics. I'm curious, what do you think about what the source said about wealth itself? They seem to be pushing back against this idea that having more money automatically makes you happier.
Right, and that's an important point. They get into this idea of diminishing returns when it comes to wealth and happiness. Basically, once you have what you need, having a lot more money doesn't necessarily make you more satisfied with life.
And they even question the typical ways people give to charities, suggesting that simply donating money isn't always the most effective way to make a positive difference. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's an interesting argument. It makes you think about our assumptions about wealth and what it's for in society. I mean, the source even brings up this radical, although maybe not very practical idea. What if someone with tons of money took over a struggling country to directly fix its problems? Of course, that raises a lot of questions about ethics and logistics, but it highlights how complicated philanthropy can be.
It definitely gives you something to think about. If you suddenly had a massive amount of wealth, what would you do? Stick with traditional charities or try something totally different?
It's a thought-provoking question for sure. It makes you look at your own values and beliefs about wealth and its
Yeah,
purpose.
it really does. But you know what else is interesting? This idea of predicting the future, which the source material touches on, it really grabbed my attention. They talk about how sometimes books, especially ones that are kind of like science fiction, do a better job at predicting the future than like traditional forecasting models. What do you think about that?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a cool idea. I think there's some truth to that. Science fiction lets writers explore those what ifs, those potential shifts in society and technology in a way that's harder for normal forecasting to do. It's like this imaginative thought experiment that sometimes gets closer to reality than just looking at data and making predictions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They even mentioned Alvin Toffler's book, Future Shock. It predicted so many of these super fast technological and social changes we're seeing today, and that was written back in the 70s. But the source also talked about this other book, The Fourth Turning. It's all about this cyclical view of history. And guess what? Apparently, we're right in the middle of one of these cycles. Ever heard of it?
Yes, The Fourth Turning is a really interesting book. The main idea is that societies go through these cycles that are about 80 years long. Each cycle has four different turnings, kind of like seasons. And each turning has its own well, its own special characteristics and challenges that shape the people who live through them. So, according to this model, right now we're smack dab in the middle of a fourth turning. And fourth turnings, well, they're usually known for crisis and upheaval.
Oh, wow. So it's like we're in the winter of this historical cycle, so to speak. That's both fascinating and a little bit scary, especially when you think about all the political and social turmoil happening right now.
It really is surprising how well the book describes what's happening today. Remember, it was written decades ago. The authors say that fourth turnings are often times of, well, unrest and big changes in society. Old ways of doing things and institutions are challenged and new ones come out of it. It's a time when societies are more open to big changes, even if those changes come with a high price.
Wow, that's pretty mind-blowing. So knowing about this model, I mean, does it make you feel more prepared for what might be coming or more worried?
I think it's a bit of both. On the one hand, it's a bit sobering to realize that we might be caught up in something much bigger than ourselves, a historical current we can't control. But on the other hand, it gives us a way to understand the problems we face. And maybe, just maybe, it can help us navigate them better.
It definitely adds another layer to understanding just how complicated our times are. But let's switch gears a bit. I gotta admit, I was surprised to see David Lynch mentioned with all these other topics. It seemed a bit, well, out of place, even for a deep dive like this.
I can see why you'd say that, but I think there's more to that connection than we might think at first. The source material mentions a few of his films, like Mulholland Drive, Twin Peaks, and The Elephant Man. Have you seen any of his work?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of David Lynch. Mulholland Drive is one of my all-time favorite movies. It's so dreamy and unsettling. It's a total masterpiece of like modern noir. And Twin Peaks, that's just classic Lynchian weirdness. It's like small town mystery meets psychological horror with a touch of the supernatural.
Yeah, he definitely has a very unique style. Lynch is known for his surrealism, his way of exploring the subconscious, and he's really good at creating these incredibly atmospheric and often unsettling worlds.
Exactly. His films stay with you in a way that
Yeah.
few others can. What do you think it is about Lynch's work, with all its darkness and ambiguity that draws people in?
Well, I think it's that ambiguity, that willingness to look into the shadows that makes his films so captivating. He doesn't give you easy answers. He makes us confront the difficult truths about ourselves and the world and grapple with those mysteries hiding beneath the surface of everyday life.
And he does it all with this really distinctive visual style. Those haunting images, the unsettling sound design, the dream logic, it's all so deliberate and effective.
Absolutely. He's creating these immersive experiences that get past our rational minds and go straight for our emotions. And I think that's something we crave, even if it's sometimes a little disturbing.
It's interesting though, because his films aren't just about darkness and despair. There's this strange beauty to them too, this sense of wonder and mystery.
Right. There's always a sense of humanity in his work, even in his most unsettling films. He's not just trying to shock you, he's trying to get us to think, to feel, to question how we see
It's
things.
like he's holding up a mirror to our subconscious, showing us all the hidden, the complexities and contradictions within us. And it's not always pretty, but it always makes you think.
I agree. And in a way, I think Lynch's films tie back into some of the other themes we've been talking about. The uncertainty, the changes happening in society, the search for meaning in a world that's constantly changing. It's all there in his work, even if it's shown through a surreal and often, well, disturbing lens.
That's a really insightful observation. It's like he's tapping into those same collective anxieties and hopes we've been discussing, but he's expressing them through art. So what does all this mean for our listener? How do gold, wealth, the fourth turning, and even David Lynch fit together in the grand scheme of things? I'm hooked. What happens next?
Yeah, I feel like we've been on this wild ride through some really big ideas. And now I'm ready for the grand finale. So how do we tie it all together? Gold, wealth, societal cycles, even David Lynch. How does it all connect?
Well, it is pretty fascinating, isn't it? I think one way to look at it is through narratives. We're always surrounded by stories about the economy, about society, even about ourselves. And those narratives, they really affect how we see the world and make choices.
Oh, okay. So you're saying the story we tell ourselves about gold, like it being a safe haven, actually influences its price and how we invest.
Exactly. And it's the same with wealth. The usual story is that wealth equals success and happiness.
Yeah.
But the source material, well, it challenges that idea, doesn't it?
Mm.
And then we've got the fourth turning, which gives us this whole story about cycles of crisis and renewal in society. It makes you wonder if these cycles are, like, inevitable. Or do we have the power to change how the story goes.
Right, and that's where it gets really interesting
Yeah.
because if we are living in a time of major upheaval, like the fourth turning suggests, then maybe we have this unique chance to change the main narratives that are shaping our future.
Okay, so where does David Lynch fit in all of this? Is he part of the problem or part of the solution?
I'd say he's more of a disruptor. His films often break down and turn conventional narratives upside down and make us question the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we hear about the world around us.
He's kind of like a cinematic rebel, shaking things up and making us see the world in a whole new way.
Exactly. He's showing us that there's more to reality than just the surface level. There are all these hidden layers and complexities and different ways of interpreting things that we often miss.
So you're saying that this ability to question those narratives, to see beyond the surface, is really important, especially now.
Definitely. If we want a better future, we need to be aware of the stories we're telling each other and ourselves. We need to challenge the narratives that aren't working for us anymore and create new ones that actually represent what we believe in and what we want.
Wow, that's really empowering. So what does all this mean for our listeners? What can they take away from this deep dive into gold, wealth, societal cycles, and David Lynch?
I think the most important takeaway is this. Be an active participant in the story of your own life and in the world around you. Don't just passively accept the stories you're given. Question them, challenge them, and most importantly, create your own.
That's a powerful message, and I think it really captures the spirit of what we've been talking about. We've explored some pretty complex and challenging ideas, but in the end, it's all about giving ourselves the power to think critically, to question what we believe, and to shape our own stories.
And don't forget, being uncomfortable and facing uncertainty can actually be what helps us grow and change for the better. So don't avoid the challenge, embrace it.
Well said. So to our listeners, as we wrap up this deep dive, we really encourage you to keep exploring these ideas. Go check out the source material, think about the questions we've raised, and most importantly, start writing your own narratives. What stories will you tell? What future will you create? Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those narratives flowing.